Thank you all for joining us. You should have just gotten a notice that this meeting is being recorded. If you're not comfortable being recorded, you can turn off your video. You should be muted already. Please keep yourself muted unless you're called on to speak, just so that we can manage with this many participants in the meeting how we are able to hear each other. And you should also know that we are going to be making this session Facebook Live, so you can take a look at it there later if you want to see the recording. We'll also be sharing the recording and all of the materials, including the PowerPoint that we're going to be using on our website. There will be a lot of materials being shared in the chat as this meeting goes, but don't feel like you frantically need to be saving all of that. We will be sharing that all on our website. So I think we're ready to get started. Okay, so just bear with me. I'm going to share my screen. All right. Can folks see my screen? A heads up or a thumbs up or a head bob if you can would be great. Thank you. All right. So welcome everyone. You should all be able to see my screen here. My name, for those of you who don't know me, is Dana Lewinter. I am the Director of Municipal Engagement at CHAPA. And welcome to our final regional meeting of this summer. This is our 8th, and we've been really excited to have so much engagement from throughout the Commonwealth. So thank you for being with us here today. For those of you who don't know CHAPA or who are new to CHAPA, just a little bit about us. Our mission is to encourage the production and preservation of housing affordable to low and moderate income families and individuals, and we foster diverse and sustainable communities. We do that through a lot of programs and policy work and initiatives. So I would encourage you to check out our website to see the kind of work that we are doing and how you might be able to get involved. And we'll be talking about some of that as we go along in our meeting here today. I do want to thank our regional meeting sponsor, Bank of America. Without them, this wouldn't be possible. They've been sponsoring our regional meetings for a while now, and we really appreciate that support to be able to get out and speak with all of you and hear from all of you, albeit in a different format this year. When I say get out, I really haven't gone too far from home, but it's really nice to be able to still engage with all of you in a virtual way. And even more exciting is to be able to engage with our local participating co-hosts. We have Housing for All in Acton, MetroWest Collaborative Development, and the Regional Housing Services Office in the MetroWest region. We're really excited to have them. They helped us to plan for this call and this meeting, and we're going to hear from them in just a few minutes. So this is our agenda. Like I said, we're going to hear from our partner organizations. We're going to get a policy update from our policy team at CHAPA. We're going to hear a little bit about our municipal engagement initiative and do some regional sharing of some data. And then we are going to hear from you. Before we get started on all of that, though, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Whitney Demetrius. She's going to walk us through a little poll to learn a little bit about what's going on in the region and the state. And while she's doing that, I would encourage all of you to just in the chat box tell us your name and where you are from, either the community that you're with or the organization that you represent. So thank you, Whitney. Go ahead.
Thanks, Dana. So I'm launching that poll now. Take a few minutes to answer the questions as best you can. You're not going to be tested in that way in terms of your answers, but hopefully these questions can prompt our conversation and discussion that we'll be having on today. So part of it is just to kind of have a sense of who is on the call with us today, but also some questions based off some research and reports that we hopefully can guide our conversation. And we'll be sharing some of the links to some of those reports as well with you all later on in the chat. So take a few minutes to do that. And again, as Dana said, if you're completed with that, please do introduce yourself in the chat so we know who all is actually on the call.
So I see lots of folks telling us who they are and where they're from in the chat. I appreciate it. Maybe just one more minute for the poll, and then we'll close it and we can share all the answers with all of you.
All right, so I'm getting ready to end the poll now. Thank you guys for working your way through this exercise. And again, we hope that it will prompt our discussion for today. I'll go over those few questions now as I end the poll and now share the results. So the first question was, who do you represent? And we're excited to see that so many of you are from local community organizations, as well as local municipalities and state organization agencies, a few consultants and some others, right? Expecting that some of the others, maybe that you are representing a confluence of those different groups, and excited to have so many of you on the call and excited to see how that really plays a role in our discussion that we'll have today regionally. The second question is, according to the American list, what percentage of American renter households were unable to make their payments in May of 2020? And again, as a result of COVID for the most part, right? And again, that number was 22%. Majority of you all got that correct, 22% of renter households. The following question, question number 3, comes from that same report and refers to homeowner households. What percentage in May of 2020 were unable to make payments? And that as well was 22%. Majority of you all got that correct. 22% also in terms of homeowner households. The following question comes from the report from the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, impacts of COVID-19 pandemic on New England homeowners and renters. And the question is, how many New England households were at risk of missing their rent or mortgage payment due to coronavirus-related job loss? And that astounding number, many of you all got correct, was more than 1 million households. More than 1 million. And again, we'll be sharing links to these reports for you guys to reference as you're having your conversation, doing your work on the ground. The following question comes from that same report and refers to, under the best case scenario, how much lost housing payments is likely to have accrued in New England from April through July. And that number, was, I think, I'm not sure if I have it correct, but that number is in the billions, closer to 3 billion, actually. And I think the number, I may have inaccurately put that in. I think the second number where I put 6 million was supposed to be 1.42, so closer to 3 billion. The next question, according to the MAPC update to the COVID-19 Layoff Housing Gap Report, it questions the 3 occupations: food preparation and serving, office and administrative support, and sales. So from just those 3 occupations, what percentage of unemployment claims came from just those 3? And you all mostly were correct, 40%. The last question, according to the MAPC update to the COVID-19 Layoff Housing Gap Report, the same report, refers to, wait, I'm sorry, I may have had an error. So it's the same question. The real question that I want to ask there, I'm sorry for the errors there in that, but the question that we wanted to ask was, how many of you all was it your first time being at our CHAPA regional meeting? And so we expect that many of you all, it's your first time engaging with us, and others, you are back again. So we really see this as an opportunity area as we're figuring out this Zoom stuff, and apologize for that error, but the real question that I was looking to ask you all was, how many of all was it your first time, or if you're returning back? So excited to have you all as part of this, and I'll hand it back over to Dana to continue our conversation so we can really hear from you all.
Thank you, Whitney. Thank you everyone for participating in the poll. And as Whitney said, all of the reports that we took those polls from are up on our website, and we will be sharing those as we go along throughout the call. So now I want to hear from our regional housing co-sponsors, and really glad that they are all able to be joining us here today. So first, is Bob Van Meter on the call? It's hard because I can't see everyone. Bob, are you on the call and able to unmute yourself so that you can speak? Okay, I don't hear from him unless he's on the phone. We'll come back to him. He may not have been able to get on yet. So why don't we go first to Nancy Flynn Barvik from MetroWest Collaborative Development. Nancy, if you can go ahead and unmute yourself, that would be great.
Hi, thank you. So I understand that you want us to talk about what we're doing and how we're facing the challenges of the COVID situation,
Yes.
right now. So really for us, the biggest challenge that we're finding is kind of logistics. So we're, as most people in this group probably are, we're very heavy on, our work is very heavy on meetings with people and physical paper documents. So logistically, that makes it kind of difficult, but it has not stopped us from completing our work, including moving forward with some development projects. So for instance, we broke ground on a 48-unit development in Newton last month, and we're moving along on pre-development feasibility analyses in 3 towns, Watertown, Waltham, and Natick. But those are not in the permit stages yet, so really the only challenges we've had have been delays getting meetings, both private meetings and public meetings. But like I said, they're not in the permitting phase yet, so we really can't speak to whether there are going to be delays in permitting. In the 7 towns that make up a regional consortium that we consult for, they're also continuing with their housing initiatives, and they seem to be doing well with that. So one of the towns, for instance, is in the process of finalizing their housing production plan. Another one of the towns is working towards getting their housing production plan certified. And another one of the towns, their housing trust, is now working on their 5-year strategic plan. Construction, lease-ups, ownership sales, initial sales and resales are still continuing in those towns as well. So really the challenges that we're seeing are really the challenges that are being faced by the people we serve. Low-income families and individuals. So what we're trying to do is find a way to provide our services in a way that they're able to access right now. We've had to cancel, unfortunately, our weekly housing clinics, which were very well attended, very popular, because they were just a very good source of information for people. They were drop-in clinics that we held weekly. And people could come in and get information on affordable housing in general, or specific housing opportunities. They would come in and we would help them either do online searches for units that were available or for lotteries that were coming up, fill out online applications, or print out applications for them to fill out by hand. So we were very sad to have to stop those, but we are now in the planning stages of figuring out a way to bring them back in a limited or modified way. Again, we're kind of in the planning stages of that, but we're really trying to get that back as soon as we can. We're working with a number of towns on their emergency rental assistance programs, either as the administrator of the program or technical assistance. And I'm going to refer to my notes so I don't get these wrong. But so, for example, some of the programs that we're acting as the administrator for, Newton has a $2.5 million emergency rental assistance program that's funded through CPA and CDBG. It's available to those earning up to 80% AMI. And currently, it's providing up to 3 months rental assistance or $7,500 per family. And we have approximately 270 applicants to date. Programs that are going to roll out soon include Belmont, which is funded at $250,000, Watertown, which is funded at $175,000, and Easton, which is funded at $85,000. Additionally, 3 of the towns in our consortium that I was talking about have rolled out and staffed their own programs, and we are providing technical assistance. We also continue to see very high demand for rental lotteries, specifically for lower priced units below 80%. And our office completed 3 lotteries. Again, I'm going to refer to my notes so I don't get these wrong, but we just completed 3 lotteries this week in developments in Lexington, where there were 6 units available and 166 applicants. Watertown, where there was 1 unit available with 63 applicants, and Arlington, where there was 1 unit available with 176 applicants. And all of those lotteries were below 80% AMI. for units below 80% AMI. Additionally, we're fielding calls from renters and homeowners about help with housing payments. So in addition to telling them, if applicable, about local emergency rental assistance programs that they can access, we're giving them information on RAFT and IRMA and where to go to get that. And then we're providing them with links to groups such as CHAPA for general information, but also because of the financial counseling links that you have, which are very important for some people at this point. And the challenges that we're seeing are especially great for low-income people with limited English skills or limited technology skills or limited access to technology, especially in this time of social distancing and everything being online. And our executive director said in a newsletter that we sent out recently, the digital divide is alive and well. And so as an example of this, when we were setting up for the Newton Affordable Emergency Rental Assistance Program, we provided 2 days of in-person application assistance. So we set up on the sidewalk in front of the office, and luckily the weather cooperated. And our staff was out there with masks and gloves, helping people with the application or accepting documents for people who couldn't provide them digitally. And over the period of 4 hours, approximately 60 households were entered into the lottery in that way. That's it.
Thank you so much for all the work you're doing, and I think that's really interesting. I haven't heard anyone talk specifically about that, the 2-day, get right out there and find ways to reach out to people. We've been hearing that through all of our regional meetings about how we can continue to do our work. In some ways, these Zoom meetings are making things more accessible, and in many ways, it's making things harder for people. So thanks for sharing that. So we're going to go now to Liz Rust. She's with us from the Regional Housing Services Organization, and I will turn it over to you, Liz, if you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Dana. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Liz Rust, and I'm the director of the Regional Housing Services Office, which is a regional collaboration of 9 towns in MetroWest: Acton, Bedford, Concord, Lexington, Lincoln, Maynard, Sudbury, Wayland, and Weston. So, like everybody else, this has been, this last few months, 4 months, have been huge change in all of housing operations for us. And starting right in the beginning in March with projects that were in the midst of permitting, which really just shut down. So, I mean, it really depends on where the development was in the cycle, but they're just picking up now. So that's really taken a long time. And even we had projects that just needed signatures from like the ZBA members, and then that was just a 3-4 month delay there. So we had some projects where the developer their financing was a little bit more difficult and have backed out from their construction financing, and so some natural delays there. And then I think, as Dana mentioned, on the positive side, we're finding increased opportunities for greater and different kinds of public participation. Through the Zoom meetings, where we have done housing production plans with public input process, fair housing studies, housing lotteries, all other kinds of public process meetings, and all have had good attendance. Of course, like in the beginning, everyone was learning Zoom and how to get the gallery view and unmute ourselves and all that, but now we're really past all that. Of course, during this time, the fiscal year end and town meetings have occurred or are still in the process, and that's also slowed down a lot of activities, a lot of zoning articles or projects that were dependent on town meeting approval. So just naturally stalled. So we're seeing a lot of 4, 5, 6, maybe even up to 8 months to, backlog in those projects. And but as Nancy mentioned, the leasing and sales cycle, so once projects are in that phase, that's going along strong. So we're marketing about 40 or so ownership units now, and the demand is strong. We've had very few applicants drop back in terms of doing their first time home purchase. Certain things are harder, contractors, home inspections, like all of those sort of natural things. We've started accepting paperwork online, and that's been easier, I think, for a lot of people. And that's, I think, one of the changes that we'll make going into, into this, this next phase of however we're going to operate, and really less on paper. We've been more in touch with the owners of all of our restricted properties and doing mailings and offering resources or more referrals to them and fielding calls. There's a lot of uncertainty, people making it through this part, but not really sure what the next 3, 4, 5 months will bring. And then, as you have heard already about with the very helpful guidance of CHAPA and MHP, we established a rental assistance program for our member communities as part of their service in our consortium. And it's a great example of the significant influence for our state partners, I'd have to say. And the meetings that were put on where, I don't even know, 1,000 people, maybe hundreds and hundreds of people attended. And also showed the readiness of many municipalities to act and commit funds using the tools that they've implemented. This was a great time, like for communities that had funded housing trusts, it's a great time for them to put those funds to use because they've been appropriated, they're available in housing trusts. So we've rolled out our program in 2 communities, working on a third coming up in another couple of weeks, and 2 others are finalizing their implementation. And while we have 100% AMI as the top limit, we find that really we're servicing a current AMI of around 40% with most households, like their pre-COVID AMI of like 65%. So really a big drop in income, really from the 65 AMI down to 40. And the properties ranging, it's interesting, ranging from large scale rental developments to really even efficiencies and accessory dwelling units in single family homes and everything really in between. So we're glad to put these funds to use in helping people make housing more affordable. So I'll just leave it there.
Thank you so much, Liz, for sharing and for all the work that you're doing. And I'll just check one more time if Bob Van Meter was able to join us by phone. If you are on the phone and you're trying to unmute yourself, you can press *6. But I don't, maybe he's had a reason he's not able to join us. So we're gonna move on. And if Bob is able to get in, we'll come back to him. So now we're going to hear from our policy team at CHAPA. We have Abi Curvey and Ryan Dominguez from the team will be joining us. So we're going to start with, I'm going to share my screen again so that folks can see some of the materials that they are going to be talking about. And I'll hand it off to Abi.
Thanks, Dana. Can everybody hear me fine?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm sorry I cannot start my video today. But thank you everybody for joining in this call. It's really great that we are coming together and having these conversations in a time that we all really need to work together. And more than any other time, let me just quickly introduce myself. I'm Abi Curvey. I'm the policy associate and work with the policy team at CHAPA to advocate various policies that we further for affordable housing and development. In terms of the epidemic, it has really become clear how much housing and health are interrelated, and never more than this time it has been so clear that we really need to focus on housing even in order to address a health crisis like this. You cannot be safe unless you have a safe home, and in terms of that, we have had to sort of rethink our policy priorities in terms of the epidemic, and our approach to ensuring housing stability during this time is to ensure equitable policies and programs for Massachusetts, make sure that renters, homeowners, landlords, and the whole housing ecosystem is sort of sustained through this crisis, and we move forward to a sustainable recovery. In that sense, we have had a whole host of things that we have worked on as our priorities legislatively and through budget to increase resources for various programs. And in terms of legislative priorities, there is a lot that we have been working on, but some things that we are focusing on currently is our old priority, the Housing Choice Bill, which reduces the threshold from a supermajority to simple majority for certain zoning ordinances, and which is currently in the we are trying to push it through the Economic Development Bill, which sort of might be one of the few things that emerges out by the end of the session, which is coming up on July 31st. And so we are on a very tight deadline here to get things done in the next 3 weeks. We do expect some bills to sort of happen beyond that, but it would be great if we can get it done in the session itself. So housing choice, which was one of our old priorities, is still very much relevant, and it's still very much required to move forward to ensure that communities have enough supply of affordable housing. They are able to have that growth and make sure that people have access to those homes. One of the things that we also worked on at the start was the eviction moratoriums, which are now in place. There are, a lot of things going on around that as well, but making sure that we are making sure that people are not like pushed out of their homes during this time of crisis. And we also worked on RAFT, which I'll talk about more in the future slides. But the other thing that we have been focusing on is also the right to counsel pilot. So the right to counsel was basically a bill that was filed even before the COVID crisis. And right now, this is a smaller version, a pilot program of that will be extremely important if we go forward with the ending of the moratorium, the eviction and foreclosure moratorium as written in the law. If the governor extends it, then that will be helpful. But at some point, whenever that moratorium does end, there is expected to be a tsunami of evictions that can come across. Almost 15,000 households can be evicted. And so it is very important that those households have legal representation to preserve those tenancies. So that is a bill that we are advocating for in this session. And also we are working on coordinating federal resources, because there's a lot of federal dollars that have been flowing into the state as well as local communities. And it's essential that as we are struggling to get out of this, that we leverage those dollars to make sure that it is used for housing, and we are helping tenants and homeowners through those resources. And going over to the budget, as I talk about resources, there has been a lot that we have been working on. We have been advocating for $50 million for RAFT, which is a program that provides housing assistance for households who in times of COVID and even otherwise. And that program has received some funding. There's a supplemental budget that is moving right now through the legislature, which has funding for public housing, for RAFT, $20 million for RAFT, and they have also increased the assistance cap from 4,000 to 10,000, which currently is available for 50% AMI households, and also more funding for the HCECs, which are the frontline agencies for housing assistance. And also there's some funding for permanent supportive housing and shelters. And so we have been trying to make sure that the supplemental budget is passed with these resources in it. And we may have a result as soon as Thursday, where we'll know what exactly is coming out of the legislature, but we are hopeful that these things will be there. As I talk about RAFT, we were also pushing for expansion of RAFT up to 80% AMI, because many households have been experiencing or might be experiencing housing instability that are not exactly, even middle-income households have been facing that. So we had been pushing for expansion of RAFT beyond 50% up to 80% AMI, and the administration has put out a new program for that AMI percentage for Massachusetts residents, and that is just rolling out as we speak. So that has been great. And not leaving our eye on the FY 2021 budget, we are wanting to make sure that important programs like the mass rental voucher program and alternative housing voucher program are not receiving funding cuts, that they are funded, because it's going to be really important as we go forward. We are not sure how long this whole thing is going to last, and it's necessary that we make sure we have enough resources in these programs to make sure people have access to housing and are able to sort of find homes and stay housed during this time and going forward. So those are just sort of a sneak peek into some of the our priorities and what we have been advocating for. I'll speak more about how you can help in this effort, and we all can sort of take this forward. But with that, I'll pass it on to Ryan to talk more about the federal priorities.
Thank you, Abi. So again, yes, I'm Ryan Dominguez, and I'm the policy analyst for CHAPA, and I help to coordinate CHAPA's federal policy work, specifically through the New England Housing Network, which is a broad coalition of affordable housing organizations in each of the New England states. And together as a network, we've been advocating down in DC during the COVID-19 pandemic for various housing and homelessness investments, some that were included in the CARES Act as well as the House's HEROES Act. And we'll continue to fight for those resources in any kind of next stimulus package that comes out of Congress, as well as the FY21 budget and any kind of infrastructure package that comes out as well. Outside of that, we've turned our focus to a lot of the resources that have already been allocated to Massachusetts through the CARES Act, and we focused our advocacy on three sources of funding. The first is the Coronavirus Relief Fund, or CRF. The second is the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG. And the last one is the Emergency Solutions Grants, or ESG. To give you a little bit of an overview, the Coronavirus Relief Fund was the largest pool of money that Massachusetts has received. And in total, Massachusetts received around $2.7 billion for their Coronavirus Relief Fund. And approximately $502 million has been made available to cities and towns across the Commonwealth. One that has already been put out for an RFP, and then another one that will be put out sometime this fall. The Coronavirus Relief Fund has been used in other cities and towns, as well as other states across the country, for things like rental assistance, as well as gap financing for affordable housing projects. And just to give you a little bit of a snapshot into some of the funding that went to some of your local cities and towns, Framingham received around $6.5 million, Milford received around $2.5 million, and Acton received around $2 million. So moving on, there's also the CDBG level of funding, and in total, Massachusetts has received around $86 million, or $86 million for CDBG, and approximately $40 million of this went directly to entitlement communities. CDBG can be used for things like 3 months of rental assistance, as well as funding housing counseling programs. And again, Framingham received around $320,000 for CDBG. Arlington received around $660,000, and Waltham received around $567,000. Lastly, there's the ESG program, which can be used for shelter costs as well as used for rapid rehousing. And in total, the Commonwealth received around $104 million for ESG, and close to $60 million of that total went to entitlement communities. So before I kick it back to Abi to let you know what you can do now as local housing advocates, I'll just say that from the federal level, it would be very helpful for your voices to be heard on the local levels. So if you can contact your local municipal officials as well as your state representatives to really ask them to prioritize housing and homelessness, specifically some of the things that Abi talked about, including rental assistance and right to counsel when they're allocating CRF dollars, CDBG, and ESG. That would be very helpful in ensuring that we can provide housing services to all of our residents kind of right now and after all of the eviction moratoriums end. So with that, I'll kick it back to Abi.
Thanks, Ryan. And I see that many of those links have already been posted in the chat box. In terms of how you can help this effort and make sure we all, advocate for this together. On the local level, as I said, there have been many funds that are available, and it would be helpful to contact your local and municipal officials. We have a sample letter that you can use to sort of write to them, asking for more public engagement process in the distribution of those funds, and helping organizing, getting inputs from members of the community, and making sure that there's a voice, our voice at the table as those funds are getting distributed. There is already a lot of local programs, local emergency rental assistance programs that have come up, and which is a great thing. If more communities can do that, that would be a really great, a complementary resource available in addition to RAFT and other programs, because there's just that much need. So that is something you can do right on your local level. On the state level, as we are speaking about, as the conversations are happening around racial equity, it has sort of helped us bring forward the housing choice bill debate as well, because that is a matter of a power imbalance. I mean, like, balancing a power imbalance. And so we have seen sort of that come up, and this is literally like the last finishing line. So if you can contact your state legislators, asking them to forward housing choice and right to counsel bills before the session ends, that would be really great. And the last thing is, all these conversations are happening at CHAPA through our committees. We have committees focused on the budget priorities, which is a Building Blocks Coalition, Housing Stability and Economic Mobility Committee for Homelessness Prevention, and Public Housing and Rental Assistance Committee. We really seek our members' input at these committees to help us drive our policy work and our efforts in this direction. So it would be great if you can, and these are committees open for all to attend. So if you can just sign on, you would receive updates and you will be able to attend the meetings, which are now happening all over from Zoom, and just help us in this effort and make sure we hear from you and many other perspectives as we are doing this work. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. I thought there was somebody in the chat who asked if how can they be more engaged. I think Dana will talk about this. You can sign on to these committees to get regular updates, and also our policy briefs to just make sure you are updated with all the things happening around housing policy.
Thank you,
So with that,
and Ryan.
Yeah.
Thank you. So yes, there was a question in the chat about how to stay up to date on all this. We do have a COVID web page on our site. We have these regular COVID response calls that you can join. And if you sign up for our housing briefs, you will get action alerts, so that if there's something that we are asking folks to take action on, you will get those updates and you can forward those all along to your members in your networks. So thank you all for that. And as Whitney has been saying in the chat, there's a lot of materials being shared. If you press the 3 dots next to the file button at the bottom of the chat, you can save all of these materials, but they will also all be on our website after the call, and in fact are already there from our prior meeting. So I will now hand it over to Whitney Demetrius. She is my colleague in the Municipal Engagement Initiative, to talk a little bit about what we do. All right, Whitney, thank you.
Thanks, Dana. So I'm excited for the opportunity always to talk about the Municipal Engagement Initiative. Our goal really is to build support for affordable housing and housing production across the Commonwealth. But it's ironic, though, that yet in many communities, there's not a strong pro-housing advocacy group sort of doing this work. And so our goal is really to expand that. And so we do that in several different strategies, really to sort of, in an effort to break the silos of all the great work that individuals are doing, and to really bring folks together to make a stronger, more impactful voice around their different efforts. So we want to build an environment that sort of supports efforts of welcoming housing, welcomes affordable housing specifically, expands housing opportunities, and then also increases the number of folks who are supporting these sort of efforts. Each of our communities are very different, though. We find that one thing that's very similar about each is that each community is unique. They have different starting points, different levels of opposition, different sizes, different forms of government, different challenges. And so we approach our work in various different ways depending on what the needs are in the community. And right now we are in 9 communities, including Arlington, Amherst, Medford, Essex, Newton, Foxborough, Lynn, Revere, and of course Acton. So we're excited about our work that we've been able to do in Acton. And in addition to that, we are in 2 MEI light communities where we sort of do our more lighter approach as opposed to our ongoing facilitation and technical assistance. We're also in Agawam and in Brookline. So we're excited to have our partner Acton for All, and the work that they have been doing, really making some key accomplishments in the community, and these are things that can be replicated throughout the Commonwealth. And so we can hopefully share some highlights to some of the things they were able to do in supporting accessory dwelling units, and some key initiatives around Springtown Meeting, supporting particular town parcels for affordable housing, just so many different things and strategies they were able to do. And so what we like to do is to be able to emulate this in as many communities as we possibly can, right? However, we know that we can't be everywhere, but we'd like to be. But we did put together an MEI Lite toolkit on our webpage where folks can kind of lean in about where they can get started if they want to kind of put together a group like this. How do we get started? How do we identify our core members and partners, and how do we expand our conversation? How do we use data to kind of guide the conversations we're having? You know, how do we get started? What's the process? So we put together sample agendas and a key stakeholder, potential stakeholders list to sort of think outside the box of the usual suspects of folks doing the work in the community to really guide you through this process. But again, Dana and I are here to really be a resource to you if you are interested in sort of doing this sort of work in your own communities. But as well, we have a feature on our page where we know where many of you all work, but we don't know where many of you all live in terms of our database. So if you connect with us and tell us where you live, and I'll provide the link for you.
Sorry, Whitney, you muted accidentally.
I muted, okay. But we can be able to connect you with neighbors who are interested in doing this work as well. So I will share in the link in the chat where you can tell us where you live, how you can get involved, and you can check out our toolkit to kind of get you started. So we're really excited about our work in terms of being able to connect neighbors and to really do this important work. And again, we're here as a resource. I won't take up too much time because I really want to hear from you all. I'll hand it over to Dana to kind of do a data dive regionally to kind of guide our conversation and some of what you all know. So thanks, Dana.
Thank you, Whitney. And yes, just to reiterate, if you guys have questions about how to do this work, Whitney and I are happy to talk to anyone about what we've been doing. So again, we're getting close to hearing from all of you. There's plenty of time on the agenda to hear from you. I just want to set some context with some of the things that we're hearing throughout the state in response to COVID with some data. So let's see, excuse me just a second so I can see what I'm sharing with you all. So this here is from a report or from the COVID Community Data Lab, what you're looking at here, which is a great resource. I encourage you to go check out this resource to learn a little bit more about what's going on in response to COVID and housing and equity. But you can see here it's showing that cities with, oops, sorry, we went forward accidentally. There we go. Cities with more frontline workers, what you're looking at here, cities with more frontline workers are have higher COVID rates. There's a couple of other things that seem to be correlated with higher COVID rates that we've been trying to make sure we focus on. You know, overcrowding has been one, and I want to make sure that it's clear what the difference is between density and overcrowding. Overcrowding is more than one person per room as opposed to multiple units in a location. Residents who are frontline workers, residents of color, and households in poverty have higher rates of COVID, and there seems to be a correlation. Just as an example, in your region, Framingham has a case rate of 237 per 10,000 residents as of June 3rd, an overcrowding rate of 2%, 39% of its residents are frontline workers, 35% are residents of color, and 10% are households of poverty. So what we want to make sure is that we're raising that and bringing it up when you're thinking about where you're going to be responding, that you're thinking about these places that might be more vulnerable. There also, you know, Whitney had shared at the beginning of the call that, you know, 22%, I think it was, of both renters and homeowners were unable to make their payments. But the story is a little bit more interesting when you look at income brackets. Obviously, lower income households are going to be stretched thinner. We know that from all of our work pre-COVID. But again, lower income households are much less likely to have made full May housing payments. So they may have made no payments, or maybe they made partial payments. Right now, we have the eviction moratorium and the mortgage forbearance. But when those things pass, there's a lot of rent that will be due, and that's what we're really focusing on right now. And a little bit even more concerning to me, at least, is that how long this is sustainable for. So less than half of folks who were surveyed, both renters and homeowners, felt that they could afford their housing costs for the next 3+ months. So again, this is concerning about how are we going to respond to this crisis, not just right now, but as we move forward. So just to keep that in mind as you continue your work. Another report that Whitney had shared at the beginning was the MAPC Layoff Housing Gap Report, and I would encourage you again to go check this out. They have now broken down their information, not just by the state in total, but by community. And so it has a lot of information about what the need is based on people's, applying for unemployment. And you can see here that 7,800 renter households and 7,700 owner households will have trouble paying for their basic needs. That's a $13.8 million monthly bill that needs to be paid. And if these folks are unable to work in August after the unemployment benefits end, which we don't know, but we're coming up close to, the situation will become much worse. And you can see the average monthly assistance. This is average. It's probably likely higher in your region where you have some of the high cost communities, $935 per rental household and $1,290 per owner household to fill that gap. Again, they've broken it down by community. For Framingham, again, to use that as our example, there are 998 households who need assistance, they estimate, because they've seen over 4,500 unemployment claims. And that's an estimated 1.18 million in housing assistance need. I see a question in the chat. These last few slides, yes, they are statewide data. But as I said, if you go to the MAPC Layoff Housing Gap Report, you can dig into it for your community in particular. And we found a lot of people finding those useful in making the case for the need in their own community for emergency rental assistance or moving forward their housing initiatives. My screen sharing stopped. Apologies. Hang on one second. Bear with me, sorry about this. All right, just a second, I'm getting it back up. You never know with these meetings. All right, I think we're back up. A head nod if you can see my screen again. All right, there's always a technical difficulty and it wouldn't feel like a normal meeting without it. So getting back to this, as you can see that there has been a great response. We've been really excited that people have been curious about how they can assist people in their own communities. We just released a report in collaboration with DHCD and MHP on emergency rental assistance programs at the local level throughout the Commonwealth. This map is just showing where there are either approved or considered emergency rental assistance programs throughout the state. That's as of May 26th. This map is actually fairly out of date already because there's been a lot of movement on this. But just a couple of key findings was that over 20 million in funding was pledged across the state to local emergency rental assistance programs. Most of these funds are dedicated to households with incomes at or below 80% of area median income. Many of them, or most of them, are actually being implemented by agencies outside of the municipality, and they generally have a limited duration. The most common source of funding for these programs was community preservation and affordable housing trust funds, many of which are funded with CPA funds in the first place. But there's a full report that you can take a look at. And you can also, there's a spreadsheet that has contacts for all of these programs and how to apply. So you can share those, or if you're curious about creating an emergency rental assistance program locally, there are also materials on how to do that. And please feel free to reach out to myself or my partners at MHP or DHCD for some assistance on doing that. I also wanted to just share there's been a wealth of data that's been coming out just over the last week or two. So you guys are actually lucky because our earlier regional meetings didn't have the benefit of some of these data points. But this was a study that was just released by Suffolk University and the Boston Foundation called Qualified Renters Need Not Apply. It showed discrimination both by against voucher holders and Black renters versus white renters. And you can see pretty much across the board, this was not statewide, this was for several communities in the greater Boston region. You can take a look at the full report to see more, but you can see just with the couple of charts that I've chosen to share here that white voucher holders were more likely, or white non-voucher holders were most likely to be shown a unit compared to their Black non-voucher holders, and both white and Black voucher holders were less likely to be shown a unit. And then when there was an offer of a financial incentive, the same sort of discrimination was shown. This is happening before COVID. It's happening in COVID. We just want to make sure that this concern is raised and racial equity is at the forefront of everything that we do. So I want to just share a couple more things that we've heard from our regional partners and just summarize it because we're about to open it up to all of you. Certainly what's going on with emergency rental assistance programs, both those offered locally and at the state level with RAFT and IRMA. But what's going to happen after the moratorium is lifted, when it's lifted and unemployment ends, is something that we just keep hearing over and over. People's ability to access those immediate relief funds, of course, there are different people who have different barriers. So whether they are able to access materials online, we found that the best practice is to make materials available often and in many ways and in many locations and meet people where they are. So to have it available online, but also maybe have hard copies at the grocery stores in your community or have hard copies at the food banks in your community so that people are able to access those funds. We heard a little bit about the impacts of delayed or shortened town meetings and what people are able to accomplish because of that. Certainly, we are always concerned about undocumented immigrants being able to access funds. There are some programs that they are not eligible for. Many of them they are, but there's still a fear of applying for programs when maybe there's not an understanding of what that will mean for their status. And also language barriers may be of a concern. We are always feeling the need to talk about racial equity in the work we do, but in this moment, we want to raise that up in particular and make sure that racial equity is at the forefront of everything that we do from a housing perspective. And again, in this moment, housing is healthcare. There's nothing more evident right now than the fact that having a roof over your head that's safe and affordable is the most effective way to keep yourself safe from COVID. And so making sure that that comes to the forefront of our conversation. I do want to open it up for a discussion, but I believe that Bob Van Meter was able to join us, so I want to go to him first to see if he wants to kick off our sharing. Bob, are you able to unmute yourself? Uh-oh. Hang on one sec. Oh, there he is.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think I'm sorry I wasn't able to be here for the first part of the meeting. I think we've had some success and not in some not great things that have happened in our town in the last 6 months on housing issues. On the success front, I think we've continued to advance the Housing Authority proposal for 31 units of elderly and disabled housing, and also continued support for another 31 unit project in Kelly's Corner. On the flip side of things, we saw a recent decision by the Board of Selectmen to expend about $1.2 million, essentially to block a 40B development that would have resulted in 7 affordable homeownership units as part of a 28 unit development that kind of ignited a wave of protest from neighbors. The development was adjacent to a town conservation land, which of course gave the opponents a strong selling point in their argument against the development. And we were not particularly allied with the developer and didn't really play a significant role in the conversation except individually as part of the town housing trust, which oversaw the process. So I think it raises some questions about kind of how housing advocates play in a space where for-profit developers are doing 40B projects, which are, they're not terrible, they're not great, but how do we relate to them? It wasn't like Newton, where the developer essentially made an alliance with Engine 6 and with housing supporters, and it was a very significant number of units. So that's one question for how municipal engagement groups play in that space, and I think there are different ways to do that in different circumstances. The other thing, which Dana just alluded to, is I think there has been remarkable level of interest and activism in our community, as well as I'm sure almost all the communities that people on this call represent, around racial equity, and how do we connect with and translate or connect the dots for the folks that are getting involved in racial equity issues, and connect them to the fight for affordable housing. And I think we're certainly we're thinking about that, and I think there's certainly places that, where those connections are being drawn, and I think we all need to kind of share how we're doing that.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah.
Oh, and
That's
there was a question in the chat, where Bob is from. So Bob is from Housing for All in Acton. They are a, well, and also on the Acton Community Housing Corporation.
Right.
But Housing for All is one of the groups that CHAPA had worked with, but they are a advocacy group that's been working to advance housing and affordable housing initiatives in Acton. And Bob also has a lot of experience in kind of the history of residential segregation and redlining. So we'll go to him if questions come up on that topic as well. So I think now we're going to open it up to general comments and questions. If folks could use the hand raising function, that would help us just to keep the process moving. But really, we want to hear from you. Really, generally, what we want to hear from you is what are the top concerns that you're seeing? Did anything that our speakers spoke about resonate particularly with you? Are the federal and state resources actually helping your community as planned, or are there gaps that you would like us to be focusing on? And what are some of the other things that you need assistance with, both now in this moment and as we move forward? So let me see if I can see any hands raising. Give me just a second. I see Lynn Sweet. Lynn, if you can unmute yourself, you can go ahead and speak.
Good afternoon. Great to see everybody. Appreciate all the information that was conveyed today. Our office does some resales and very, very rarely occasional lotteries for small projects. The resources that I think would be helpful for us is some resources with regard to language barriers. I don't know if there's a place on the CHAPA site that or resources out there for interpreters, because our volume is not as high as a normal lottery agent. That may be something to either help with either interpretation or translation that we could possibly reach a wider audience when we're doing our resales. Thanks so much.
Excellent, great point. And yeah, I think this is something that we've been finding, both because we aren't able to meet in person as much. So we're trying to make sure all of our materials are translated. So we will definitely take that back and see if we can find some good resources for you. I see that Jay Ball has raised his hand.
It's Erica Ball.
Erica, okay, thank you.
Yeah. Member, my husband's on the Affordable Housing Trust, and I'm on the Natick Housing Authority.
Great.
And we both work with Family Promise, which I don't need to introduce. But my issue is the following. Natick is a very hot town, real estate-wise, and I live in an old Campanelli development built in the 50s. And we have about 4 or 5 such developments throughout town. And what's happening is that the builders are snapping up those houses and converting them, doubling the prices. On my street alone, 4 of the houses have been converted into $1 million plus houses. And so the affordable housing market, by, for all practical purposes, is being decimated. And I would like to develop a way of retarding that movement. It's happening very quickly, and before a neighborhood is able to get itself mobilized, and I don't know what we would do once we were mobilized in terms of zoning that would slow this down and would allow for programs that support lower income people with home ownership to access those units. Right now, they're disappearing under your eyes. Everywhere in my neighborhood, there are 2 or 3 houses that have been, taken down to the ground and rebuilt into $1 million plus houses. I have an idea as to how to deal with this in terms of mandating that builders who buy those properties be made to pay in the same way as builders who access greater density have to pay a fee that then goes for affordable housing. I think this ought to be mandated for builders who are buying properties and then turning them into $1 million houses, that they should have to pay a fee to the fund for affordable housing units. And I don't know, I've tried to get my economic development department to look at that issue, but I think it would be much more useful if some organization like CHAPA, that's used to planning in that, used to playing in that space, would take up this issue and help develop zoning bylaws that can be implemented in the various towns to deal with this problem.
Thank you, Erica. I appreciate the comment and the concern. And just so I want to clarify, because it sounds like these are not restricted units or restricted homes, but homes that are more affordable just because of their size and that they're already existing. Okay,
exactly.
So yes, we have heard this comment or a similar comment from some of the other communities we're working in, and I definitely will take that back to CHAPA to think about it. I know of a couple of communities that have started programs to actually purchase homes before developers do and keep them affordable. We also are working, one of the communities that we're working in is Foxborough, and that's a concern that's been coming up there as well. So exploring what the strategies might be to keep units somewhat affordable without expending a significant amount of funding to do it is certainly a concern we've heard. I don't know if others have had examples on that. And yes, I see Rachel is mentioning in the chat our support for transfer fees and several bills in the legislature that would allow the establishment of those fees, which is similar to what you were discussing there with the idea of paying in like you would a linkage fee, etc., on smaller scale properties as opposed to just new development. Thank you for that point. Others want to share or have ideas or challenges that you've been facing in your communities? Can't see anyone raising their hand, but I'm going to start calling on folks if they don't. Oh, there's Franny. I see your actual hand raising, Franny, if you want to unmute yourself.
Not really an issue in my community, but I wanted to comment to Ms. Ball. I forget her first name, but whatever. J. Ball.
Erica, yes.
Erica. That discussion has come up in our subregion of the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, in the Magic subregion that Acton is in, and I remember hearing Concord and Lexington doing various creative things to try, and Bedford maybe. specifically Concord, I remember them thinking about that, trying to stop the tear downs with some zoning things. So I would look into those also and ask the Magic subregion.
Great. Thank you. So other folks, what are you experiencing, or what are the challenges, or what sorts of resources could you use right now? Jen, go ahead. Jen Van Kampen.
Yes, I'm not answering your question, Dana. I just
That's
want
okay.
to make a plug for Housing Choice, and kind of connecting it back to what Bob said earlier. It seems to me that it is a sort of imperative issue of justice that there be multifamily zoning in every damn town in this state. So some of you are in districts where you have legislators who are not supporting housing choice. So please connect with the CHAPA staff and figure out where your state legislator stands, because this is obscene and ridiculous that we haven't passed this yet. Thank you.
I will put in a plug. Thanks, Jen, for mentioning that. And I will put in a plug for at least a couple of the communities that we've been working with to say, what you can do locally. They've been having meetings with their state legislators. They've been writing letters and getting people to sign on to it. So if you and your community are interested in doing that, reach out to us. Rachel, yep, go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. That is a great plug. And I just want to stress the urgency of it. The legislature is down to its final days and will make a decision on whether or not housing choice is included in any bill that moves. So it was part of an economic development bill. It has been removed, but there are many innings left in this game. And so you speaking up now really can help to put it back in and make sure that we leave this session on July 31st with housing choice.
Yes, and I think that Whitney had shared, and maybe she can share it again because we've lost the thread here at some point, but it's further up the details on the economic development bill and where it is. But yes, to reach out to, the push is on right now. So please to do that. I see, Erica, you have your hand up again. You want to go ahead?
I did. I don't know if the transfer fee is part of housing choice, is part of an omnibus housing bill. If not, I would urge people to reach out to their legislators and support that bill. We have tried on a local level in our town meeting to pass that locally. It received pushback and a lot of suggestions, good ones, from our finance committee, and it was reworked. But now with COVID, all of our zoning articles and all of those things have been put to the side for action in the fall. So perhaps we'll be able to, but if we could get this on the state level, that would be fantastic. So that is something that I think every community would benefit from, especially those that are not part of CPA. We made the mistake of not joining the first time, and so we would really benefit from having that.
Yeah, I might add that it's House 1769 is the bill that seeks to have an affordable housing option locally, and it's been stuck in committee since June. I'm sorry, since January.
Yeah.
So,
thank you, Jay and Erica, on that. And I think we do have some materials on that on our website as well. So we can share a link to that. And I see also, there's comments in the chat, it's not just about telling our legislators that we want these things to happen, but then supporting them and showing them that we support them so that they hear from us over and over again when they do support those things that we want to pass. Other comments, questions, challenges that are going on in your communities? How are folks feeling? I heard a couple comments about, things being pushed off to town meeting. How are folks feeling about the work you're doing moving forward in this moment? Are you seeing any challenges with that? Or any concerns about losing the momentum on the initiatives that you've been taking up locally?
My name's Sue Cross. I'm from Family Promise. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. And we run a shelter transitional living program and a homeless prevention program. And it's interesting because with the moratorium obviously is a good thing. But what's happened is the referrals coming into our homeless prevention program have dropped significantly. And I think because it's given everyone a false sense of security. So we're actually doing a push right now to try to get people before they lift the moratorium. And we've been doing it all along, but now we just put together some collateral to go out to the food banks and some of our partners in the community to try to see if we can get people before they're just so far behind. And our program's a little different because we give the subsidy to help for rent and arrears, but then we do case management for a year. So we're able to really keep people and sustain them, and as opposed to just giving them a check and hoping it works. So we're working very closely with our families now, and we've gone back to families that we've served in the last few years to see if people are in trouble. Our first survey in March, about 67% of our families had either lost their jobs completely or, dropped their income. So we've been helping out through the process. So we're concerned, as everyone is, that people are just getting this, false sense of security, and that all hell's going to break loose in September or mid-August. Yeah.
Thank you, Sue, for that comment, and also for the work you're doing. I think that's an interesting perspective that I hadn't heard from others, that we're all really glad that we have this eviction moratorium and it's giving us a moment to breathe and pause, but that doesn't mean that the risk is gone. And so how are we doing that outreach to folks and making sure that everyone hears about the assistance that's available to them? So thank you for raising that point. I see, Lynn, you have your hand raised again.
Hi, it's more of a production issue. So we do Chapter 40B permitting. We have one town that is totally online. They don't want things to get backed up. They're going to have a virtual hearing right away. We have another town that has no resources, no ability to get going on permitting. They're trying to get permission to use an elementary school to have in person. We don't think there's going to be a lot of abutters at the meeting. Hoping. I just, don't know that there has been nothing in the recent executive orders rescinding the original moratorium on permits and public hearings and whatnot. So I don't know if there's any updates, but it is impacting production not to be able to have hearings. And it's again, yeah, long way off. Even if they do overturn it, it's still another 45 days away. So it could be 6 months, before you get something heard.
Yeah, thanks for raising that. We've heard it from some communities, or I know some, like you said, some communities have been able to really move forward and very quickly have transitioned to being able to do all of that work virtually, and others have not. So if there are specific communities that are having that trouble, I know that the folks at MAPC were doing some work around which communities have been really successful at doing that. And there are some examples actually on this call, I think, who have been pretty successful. So we might be able to connect some folks up with best practices on that as well. I see, Franny, you have your hand raised.
I do a short-term rental, and I noticed that there's an incentive they give. They give prizes in terms of listings, ratings, and things like that. If you refund or credit people for changes due to COVID generously. And I wondered if there's some kind of incentive program regionally or statewide that could be the analogy of that. And maybe some of the programs you mentioned are, that for landlords bending over backward to help, that they somehow get some kind of benefit.
Okay, yeah, so the idea that if landlords reduce rent or allow us a lower rent payment, there would be a benefit to the landlord as well.
During COVID or the bank or mortgage delays, yeah, things like that. For banks or landlords.
Great point. Thanks, Franny. Other folks, challenges or concerns that you've been having? I see Susie, did you want to speak?
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Susie Affleck from Medway. I Nice to see some familiar faces. Hello to folks. Well, first off, just a wonderful shout out to Jen Van Kampen and MetroWest. We are so thrilled and proud to be associated with MetroWest and have this 48-unit development underway in our community, and look forward to the second phase as well with family housing. So rah-rah to them for sticking with it, and I'm proud of my colleagues in Midway for supporting it through the CPA program. Rah-rah CPA. But the other thing I did want to mention is that Medway, Foxborough, Sherburne, and Medfield, and I think Tara Raposa from Medfield is on this call as well, are working with MAPC on some research relating to living little, looking at smaller housing typologies. And in particular, they're working on a toolkit that's going to be developed, and we're working on some zoning for kind of cottage cluster kinds of development. So modest houses, you know, smaller areas, smaller floor plans, and that sort of thing. So that's kind of in the works. We're sort of excited about it, and we'll, you know, see how it all plays. But something to kind of be aware of. And then there's some communities in the South Shore as well that are doing something sort of similar. So,
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you, Susie, for sharing that. And yes, a great shout out to the folks at MetroWest. Others, we have just probably a couple more minutes for comments that we, you know, to hear from you, or challenges that you're seeing before we move on. I don't see anyone else raising their hand, so I think we'll move on. Last call. Oh, and so yes, thank you. Franny has reiterated her question in the chat, and we will look into that. So tax abatements or any sort of incentives for landlords for rent forgiveness. Thank you for that. All right, so we're going to move on. Just going to close it up. I'm just going to share my screen one more time, and hopefully it works this time. We don't lose you. So here we go. Before we let you go, we want to make sure that we stay engaged with you. So there are plenty of ways to stick with us. You can join a CHAPA committee, as Bea mentioned. We have a lot of ways. Those are open, and they are all happening virtually right now. So if you are able to attend, you can do it from hopefully the comfort of your own home. So check out our website to find out when those are happening, and that's where a lot of our work really gets done. They're in-depth conversations. We really do want to hear from you, and having a range of stakeholders in those meetings makes them really effective. You can attend a forum. We are still holding forums even in this virtual age, and we are sharing most of them on our website afterwards. So we've had a forum on how to establish emergency rental assistance programs. We've had a forum on how to access RAFT and what all of the changes are that are coming to RAFT. And we have others planned for the future. And we also have our CHAPA dinner, which will be a little different this year, but still really exciting, which is on October 21st. So please save the date and check out our website to attend any of our events. And then a couple of other things you can do on our website. As we said, you can sign up for our monthly housing briefs. That's the best place to stay in the loop when there are critical things like talking to your legislators over the next couple of days about housing choice or other action alerts. You can engage locally with us through MEI. As Whitney mentioned, we have a link where you can tell us where you live. If you're interested, we can run through that database and see if there are other people who live in the same city or town as you and connect you and hopefully get you going on the route of the folks like in Acton who have been doing this work. And obviously you can become a CHAPA member, and you can find out how to do that on our website as well. So with that, I just want to say thank you. Here's our contact information for everyone who spoke today. And please do not hesitate to reach out to me or anyone else with any of your questions. And again, reminder that you can save the chat, and all of our materials will be up on the website, including the recording of this session as soon as we are able. Thank you everyone so much. Yes, please.
I just want to note that not if you got off and then get on, or you came on late, you don't see everything that came before you on the chat.
Oh, okay.
So if you could save it and put it up there, it would be really helpful.
I can do that. Yes, I probably won't put the full chat up there, but all of the materials are. and we will make sure to share all of the ideas and questions that were generated through this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Yes, to save the chat, you press the 3 dots at the bottom of the chat screen. It looks like 3 little dots next to each other. And if you click on it, there's a save chat option.